Good afternoon, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to our fourth installation of our reproductive health convening here at West Virginia Free. My name is Sarah Harris. I'm the Director of Programs, and today I'm here to welcome you to a very important discussion about the disparities in infant and maternal mortality here in our Mountain State. I'm very excited to introduce our panelists today. We have Rhonda Rogombe from the West Virginia Center of Budget and Policy here to talk with us. We also have Vania Riddle from the Women's Health Center of Charleston and Danielle Walker with the ACLU of West Virginia. So today's discussion is going to be quite impactful and powerful, and I hope that you stay tuned. One of the beautiful things that we've done this year with this convening is bring it virtually so that you can access it across a variety of platforms and in this time and space that you have. If something comes up, you can stop where you're watching and then you can pick it back up later. If you have questions at any time, we'd love for you to drop them in the chat. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Rhonda and we'll get started.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm looking forward to talking about this issue with you today. If we could just go ahead and pull up the slides. I have my little intro in one of them. So
yeah, I'm trying to get them to go up there. It's being strange. Hold on just 1 second. Oh, all right. Okay, there we go. Got it.
Awesome. All right, so my topic today is Black infant and maternal mortality. We're going to be looking at birthing outcomes for Black West Virginians and Americans as well. So just my introduction. On the right side, we have my nephew. He's 2 months old. And I just, I think this is a very personal issue, and it is for a lot of people. And so I just, as I'm going through this presentation, I want to remind you all not to think of this as an abstract issue that is just affecting people out there, but it is, something to think about in our communities, in our families, with people we know. So him being born has really made this a much more personal issue for me. I just want to make sure that we're not just thinking about the numbers, we're thinking about the lives that are impacted. But as has already been said, my name is Rhonda Rogombe. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Health and Safety Net Policy Analyst at the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy, where I've been working for 3 years. My focus is on health disparities within the state, especially within low-income groups, populations of color, and other marginalized groups. And I have a big focus on Medicaid in the state. A lot of my work has been around improving policy, administrative and public policy within the Medicaid program, as well as story collection, which I will talk about at the end of this presentation. The bottom just has my contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you would like to talk about this or other issues. I would really love to hear from you all about what your thoughts are. Next. So our agenda for today, I want to start off with a trigger warning. Obviously, the title says mortality, and a lot of what we will be talking about is death. And I just want to make sure that you all are aware of that. I also wanted to put a disclaimer out on gender. Traditionally we talk about this as a women's issue, but it impacts many people who are not women. And so I do use maternal very much, but when I say that, I do mean people who are not women as well. And I just wanted to highlight that. So we're going to do a brief outline of the problem, talk about infant mortality in West Virginia, and then go into maternal mortality, both in West Virginia and the US. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on this as a US issue because of the lack of data that we have in the state. And then finally, I'm going to conclude and take your questions. So why is this topic important? We know that maternal and infant health outcomes are indicators of overall societal health. When people are dying unnecessary deaths I think it says something about the society that we live in. It says something about the systems that we have in place, and it's important to challenge those. In the United States, infants and birthing parents are dying at alarming rates. And the disparity between the United States and other comparable countries, countries that the United States considers peers, indicates that this is not an issue that needs to happen. And we'll go more into that. But the US is doing worse than many of our peer nations. And when you zoom in on West Virginia, it only becomes more glaring. So again, that raises questions about health and social equity between various populations. Black and brown populations are seeing worse outcomes than their white peers, including in West Virginia, and even when controlling for various factors like income, education, other factors, meaning that if you hold all these things constant, Black and brown birthing parents and babies are still dying at higher rates than their white counterparts. And that's a serious and significant issue. And we also see these disparities between people of different incomes, and geographically where you live also plays a big role, which again highlights gaps in our healthcare system and in our society. Not only our healthcare system, but our economic system as well. Next. So, infant mortality in the Mountain State. So the infant mortality rate is measured by the number of deaths in children under a year old per 1,000 live births. So for every 1,000 births, how many babies die in that first year of life? As I mentioned, the US is not doing so hot. We are ranked 50th out of 100 countries, with the infant mortality rate over 4 times higher than top 10 countries that see fewer than 2 infant deaths per 1,000. In between 2014 and 2017, this is the most recent multi-year data outside of the pandemic. In West Virginia, we saw 7.2 deaths per 1,000, which is higher than the national rate of 5.9 deaths per 1,000. Now, looking at West Virginia more closely, white babies there are 6.8 deaths per 1,000, but that rate skyrockets for Black babies. It's 13.7 deaths per 1,000 over that same period. So plainly stated, Black babies in West Virginia are twice as likely to die than their white peers before turning 1 year old. Sit with that. Next. So this is just a visualization of those numbers that I just stated. So the gold bar is West Virginia, the blue is the United States, but you can see both within the US and within West Virginia, the Black mortality rate is higher for babies, but also West Virginia is doing worse than the US overall in every category. And this is just an image of what that looks like compared to other states. As you can see, we are almost all the way to the right. That kind of like brown bar is where West Virginia was in 2018. And keep in mind that even our best state, California, we didn't have any reports for Vermont, but even the best states are still doing worse than many countries that we consider peers. That, as I said, that was about 1.5, which is lower than even our best rates. So something to consider. So some common causes of infant mortality. There are 2 main categories: neonatal, which is that first month of life, the first 4 weeks, and then post-neonatal is from after the first 4 weeks to 1 year. Most infant deaths are within the first month of life and include causes such as being born preterm and a low birth rate or birth weight, congenital malformations, maternal complications, placenta, cord, and membrane complications, and bacterial sepsis, which is an infection. But even beyond that, if you are fortunate enough to make it through those first 28 days, they're still within the first year, congenital malformations, sudden infant death syndrome, accidents, circulatory systems diseases, and assault. So you can see that many of these are preventable and don't need to happen, but these are what are driving our infant mortality rate in the US and in West Virginia. So this is just a breakdown of when infant deaths are occurring. 2/3 of those are neonatal, with many of them being, almost 15% of them being within the first hour. Yeah, harrowing statistics. Shifting over to maternal mortality. So maternal mortality is measured a little bit differently. It is the number of maternal deaths related to or aggravated by pregnancy per 100,000 live births. So for every 100,000 people that give birth, the number of individuals who die. Again, the United States is doing worse than a lot of our peer countries. We ranked 57th out of 211 countries in 2020. And the maternal mortality rate in the US during that year, 2020, was 10 times higher than our peer nations. So in 2020, our rate was about 23.8 deaths per 100,000, and many countries saw 2 or fewer deaths per 100,000. Between 2014 and 2019, West Virginia experienced 14 deaths per 100,000, which is a little bit better than the United States average at 17.3 deaths. And breaking down the United States a little bit further, we saw 14.1 deaths per 100,000 within white populations and 39.9 or nearly 40 deaths per 100,000 for Black populations, which is over 3 times higher. In West Virginia, we really don't know how pervasive this issue is for Black birthing parents because the state does not break down this information by race. But given what we're seeing already with the numbers on the national level, we can only imagine that in the state, Black birthing parents have worse outcomes than their white peers. So this graph is just indicating the numbers that I just showed, but you can see that dark blue bar is Black parents, and the light blue is white parents. And as I said, in West Virginia, we don't have that data available, but I still wanted to visualize what the disparity looked like in our state or in our country. So these are just 3 years of data on the national level. As you can see, it was rising going into the pandemic, and the pandemic did increase these numbers further. I didn't include numbers from 2021 and 22 because there were some issues with the data, especially collecting it during a pandemic was certainly proved challenging, but the pattern continued, the trend continued where we saw maternal mortality continue to increase. And again, if you look at the statistics for Black birthing parents, it is just so much worse than the overall population and the state, or actually these are, sorry, continue. So looking at the top causes of maternal mortality, cardiovascular conditions, infections, cardiomyopathy. Yeah, I cannot pronounce that. I'm sorry. Hemorrhage, and pulmonary or other embolisms. Two things that really, really concern me about this. One is that almost 10% of them, 5 to 10% of them are like unknown. There is no reason for not knowing why a person has died, especially in even knowing like it's in relation to, giving birth or being pregnant. There's no reason for that to be unknown. But even beyond that, and something that I didn't spend as much time on for this presentation, was the phenomenon wherein people experience life-threatening complications during or after childbirth that don't lead to death, but still have long-term consequences for the infant, the parent, and their family and the community. So for every death, 75 to 100 people suffer life-threatening conditions and complications. And this data is even more murky. We really don't have anything about this on the state level whatsoever. But even within the United States, it's pretty ambiguous. And I think that beyond mortality, this is an issue that really, really requires a lot of focus. Yeah. And again, just breaking out what mortality for those parents looks like. Over half of them are postpartum. And this is within that first year of after a person gives birth. So I wanted to zoom out a little bit on Black maternal mortality in the United States, because this, and I really want to emphasize, this is an issue that is unique to the United States, the way that it occurs. I didn't spend any time talking about Indigenous and Native populations because, again, in West Virginia, we simply do not have any access to this information, but we know that they face outcomes that are even worse than Black folks. And when you think about the historical context of how Indigenous people have been treated in this country and continue to be treated and pushed out of everything, it makes sense that these rates are so high. And I wanted to acknowledge that. As I mentioned, these rates have increased during the pandemic, and there are a lot of reasons for that, including just the way that things shut down and people really had less access to the healthcare system. But it goes beyond that. We know that in West Virginia, Black folks have a higher uninsured rate than their white counterparts. But even, for people who have insurance, there's a whole system around it. Like, are you able to get off of work to go to the doctor? Do you trust your doctor? Do you have transportation to get you to and from an appointment? Do you have a person in the room who can understand all the terms that are being thrown at you and can advocate on your behalf? Are you able to escalate issues when you feel you're being mistreated? These are all things that impact impact outcomes, even if you have health insurance. Something to think about is that being a person of color is not and should not be considered a risk factor. Inherently, because you are Black or because you are brown, it does not mean that you should have a riskier pregnancy and birthing experience as your white counterparts. We have a healthcare system that treats people of color worse, and that needs to be examined. We have an economic system and a social system that treats people of color worse, and those things play into how birthing experiences happen. These, as I said, these racial disparities and maternal mortality, as well as infant mortality, are a uniquely US phenomenon. We spend more money than any other country on healthcare per capita, and yet see these outcomes. even when controlling for education, income, um, and all these other factors like social connections and all these different pieces, Black birthing parents are still worse off. And to really like drive this point home, immigrants of color do not experience this phenomenon until the next generation gives birth in the United States. So in my own life, my mom she grew up in the Congo, and she came to the United States and gave birth here, and she had 4 healthy babies. It is much more likely that I or my sister will experience maternal birth complications, or that our babies will die or experience low birth rates or be born early. All these factors that I highlighted earlier on, it's much more likely that my sister and I will deal with this than my mom, despite being in the same family, because it happens here. It is something that is happening in the US, and it's not the people necessarily, it's not the individual, it is the system that we have. Next slide. So I just wanted to show you a figure that just highlights some of these points a little bit better and breaks these things down. As I said, there are so many things that go into birthing outcomes that are outside of the healthcare system itself. Things like economic stability, the physical environment that you are in, education, food, the community that you're in, and the healthcare system. And as you can see, the healthcare system is just one of these tenets. Even if you hold all the factors up to the healthcare system constant, 2 people, a white person and a Black person, who have the same job, who have the same level of economic support, who live in the same neighborhood and have the same house, who have a great education and access to the same foods and choices, and have the same sort of community experience, have support systems and feel supported. All of these factors do not protect Black women from the disparities that the healthcare system brings. Although it is important to note that Black and brown folks are more likely to experience the stressors in each of these categories. And so those things only compound and really aggravate the issues that are within the healthcare system. So, and I am curious about how other people perceive this issue, so please do feel free to jump into the chat. But why is this a uniquely United States and, of course, West Virginia issue? As I mentioned earlier, I do a story collection project wherein I talk to Medicaid enrollees about their healthcare experiences and what Medicaid means to them. And something that I learned in that first year of doing the story collection project is that people expect the system to be unkind to them. They expect things to be difficult to navigate. They expect for people to not listen to them, and for them to have to jump through hoops in order to receive healthcare. Of course, Medicaid only represents one of many of the populations that I've talked about here, but I think that it is worth noting, especially in West Virginia, where a third of our population is covered by Medicaid, that people expect things to be hard. And that's no way to live. And that is no way to navigate a healthcare system, especially if you are pregnant or have young children. It's embarrassing, honestly, that our country puts so much onus on the individual to be able to navigate a system and doesn't really advocate for them. I've already talked a little bit about this, but systemic racism really does play a big role, not only within our healthcare system, but outside of it. And we really, really, really need to acknowledge that. Our healthcare system was founded on exploitation and pain of minority populations, of enslaved people, of Black folks. And we have such a deep history with that, and to not reckon with that means to continue it. We really do need to come to terms with the ways that our healthcare system and that our society at large has continued to and has historically brutalized the bodies of people of color. It's much more subtle today, but I can say from my own experience, and I'm sure that others can too, that racism still plays a big role in how we experience life. And I wanted to briefly touch on this concept that was introduced to me by Dr. Andrus, who does a lot of work in West Virginia around maternal mortality. It's this concept that trauma is passed down intergenerationally, and that when one person in a family, is brutalized, think about just our history with slavery, for example, our bodies carry that. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And this kind of extends upon that in the frame of the racism and discrimination that Black people face. But it's this idea that our bodies remember this, and it is passed down from generation to generation, and it wears you down, and it makes us sicker. There are so many statistics about cortisol levels being higher in populations of color, experiencing stress to a much greater degree, and when your body is not running optimally, your baby will feel that, your household will feel that, and it impacts not only the birthing experience, but life thereafter. If it's difficult to make ends meet and you are constantly being bombarded by a system that does not want you to succeed, your children are going to experience that, and they're going to take that with them. And I think it goes beyond breaking the cycle for one person, because it is a system that is set up for us to fail. As I mentioned, also, the United States spends more capita than any other country, but has worse healthcare outcomes. I believe in a single payer system. I believe in healthcare for all. And I believe that healthcare is a right. But the United States believes in profits, and it believes in a system that is unfair, that people have to pay for, that people who don't have money don't deserve to have the same access to treatment and care than others. And we really, I could go on my capitalist rant or my anti-capitalist rant, but really, we really need to consider a system that makes sure that every person has access to the tools that they need to survive and to succeed. I've already touched on this, but people of color are less likely to have healthcare access than their white peers. And again, that goes beyond insurance. It goes into so many pieces around making sure that you are able to see a doctor. And even when you can see a doctor, do you trust them? Do they have your best interests at heart? These are all things that people of color have to consider in a way that many other people don't. And these problems are exacerbated by, all the holes that we have in rural areas. In West Virginia, we are, hospitals continue to shutter. Hospitals continue to have their birthing centers close. And people have to travel further and further in order to see their doctor on a routine basis and to give birth. And that takes a toll on a person, especially those in rural areas. And it's important that we acknowledge that. And lastly, in West Virginia specifically, so all of these things apply to West Virginia, but the United States at large, but specifically in West Virginia, the lack of data that we have around what birthing outcomes look like for Black birthing parents is a significant issue. If we cannot outline the issue, then how can we begin to address it? We also need to make sure that we have laws in place that allow for progressive healthcare changes. And Vanna is going to talk a little bit more about doulas and midwives, but the most traditional process that we have is really being pushed out by systems that are built around profit. And that's something to think about. And lastly, flat budgets that mean that these services that people deserve, Medicare, Medicaid, other things, the dollar just continues to go less and less far because we haven't increased it to match inflation and to expand services. And with recent tax cuts that were passed last year or this past year, we will only continue to see that trend. So I know that was super depressing, but I thank you all for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions. I wanted to also flag that October 15th and 16th, we are hosting a convening to really talk much more deeply about the issues that I've outlined, and lift up spaces for people to talk about their own experiences, which I believe Danielle Walker will also be doing on this panel. But please register if anything that I said resonates with you today. And please pass this along to people who may have been impacted by this issue. We really want to convene around it and talk about specific policy things, which I didn't get too much into, about ways to improve birthing outcomes for Black and Brown communities in West Virginia. Because when we address, the problems for the most vulnerable populations, we see benefits that go beyond. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. That was a wonderful, eye-opening, gut-wrenching presentation. I'm going to go over here. I think most of the questions that have been posted in the chat were addressed in later slides, but this one stood out to me. I'm going to bring it up on the screen here. Tess Myers asked, what's the percentage of infants with SUD and NAS? I'm not sure if you know that data offhand, but as it related to infant and maternal mortality, was that something that stood out?
I don't have the specific numbers, and I can certainly share whatever I'm able to find with you to share to email listservs. But that is something that I didn't really touch on in West Virginia, is the ways that the opioid epidemic has really harmed communities and families. And it is something that that only, contributes to that. And unfortunately, I think that the ways that they're being addressed are inadequate. We have a system that is, I think Vania can potentially talk more about what the Women's Health Center is doing around helping communities that are facing substance use disorders. But we have a system that is so punitive and exclusive that makes a lot of people, it makes it hard for a lot of people to access and stay with. So, yeah.
Thank you, Rhonda. All right, deep breaths. We're going to introduce our next guest, Vania Riddle with the Women's Health Center. Vania's been with the Women's Health Center for 11 years, and she served in a variety of roles. Up until the abortion ban, she served as the Director of Abortion Services, and she's currently transitioning in that space and has now decided to become a certified doula. So we thought we'd bring her in here and join in on the conversation, because one of the ways that we could potentially improve outcomes would be through more supportive care for mother and baby during pregnancy, during childbirth, and during those first 30 days where you said the window of infant and maternal mortality is still very, very high. So, Vania, stage is yours.
Oh, hi, everybody. So what is a doula? A lot of people really don't know what a doula is or what we do. But the word doula comes from the Greek word meaning caregiver. So a doula is trained and experienced as a labor companion who provides clients and their partners with continuous emotional support, physical comfort, and assisting in obtaining information before, during, and after their childbirth experience. So hopefully during this time with you all, I'll go over what a doula does, like what role we play, what services we offer, how you can find a doula if you want one, and all that stuff. Can y'all hear me? Okay. So a doula's mission is, our vision is to, for every pregnant person to have a doula if they want one. Our mission is to promote high quality birth and postpartum support by setting standards for the doula profession through evidence-based training and certifications for doulas with diverse backgrounds. And our statement of values is to welcome and embrace the strengths and of our differences, and encourage involvement and provide equal access and opportunities and information to all patients. So hopefully one day everybody will have a doula to help them out. A doula doesn't take the place of the partner or like the support person, the husband or the wife or whatever. We're there to help provide extra support for those people. New parents, they go through this and they have no idea what they're doing. So, you hear about dads falling on the ground, passing out. Our job is to help the patient and to help the support person, because if the support person's on the ground, the patient's going to get a little, nervous. So our goal is to help everyone involved in the birthing room. Our ultimate goal is to make sure that the patients have a safe and satisfying birth experience the way they want it done. We as doulas will meet with a client and ask them what is their ideal birthing experience. What would they want in their birthing experience? Whether that be medications, no medications, they don't want you to touch them. They want you to speak to them. They want music, just different ways of coping through the various stages of labor. And our job is to create a childbirth plan and put that in place. We stand up for the patients. We advocate for them. If the patients don't want pain medications, but if they're giving birth in a hospital and the nurses are like, oh yeah, you're at this centimeter, you're in pain, let's give you some medicine. Our role is, we don't speak for the patient, but we speak to the patient and say, well, so-and-so, you had stated that you didn't want this, that this is the plan that you wanted. And so that patient has the ability to tell the nurse what they do and don't want, and we can support them through there. So in the 1970s, there were two doctors that investigated ways to enhance parent and infant bonding, and found that having a doula in the labor room improved the bond between the birthing person and the infant, as well as it decreased the incidences of complications. When someone's pregnant and they're going through labor and they're in a lot of pain and they can hurt themselves, your job is to calm them down so that they don't hurt themselves, and they lay still, and they, or we move them and get them comfortable and they don't have to sit there in pain, because there's various ways that we're trained to reduce pain without medication. Not saying that they won't get medication anytime they want it, but it needs to be their choice and what they want, and not what the healthcare provider is telling them. So a birth doula is trained and experienced in childbirth. We provide emotional support, physical support measures, objective viewpoints, and we assist the clients to make good decisions. We support laboring throughout the whole entire labor. We meet with the clients before, so I'm available to patients from the time that I sign up with them through their pregnancy. If they have questions or if they need resources, I'm available. We facilitate communications between the laboring client, their partners, their care providers, and we nurture and protect the client's memory of the birth experience. So like at the end and everything's said and done and you have your baby, a lot of people forget, like certain parts of their labor, and they're like, oh, you meet with your girlfriends and they're like, oh, I remember this in labor, I remember that. And some women are like, I can't remember anything. So we kind of get all that together so that we can help the patient, remember what their experience is like giving birth. We continue through postpartum. Once you bring your baby home and you're on your own, a postpartum doula is really helpful because they're there to support the patient through the adjustment period of becoming a parent. And now you have this little creature that you have to take care of, and you have to do it when you're sleep deprived. And sometimes women have postpartum depression. So sometimes they have issues that, their babies won't latch if they're trying to breastfeed. So they have all these emotions going crazy, and a postpartum doula can help calm the patient, help the patient get over the hurdles that they're going through, and just support them, help them with newborn development, help them with care of the newborn and feeding, helping them instruct them on breastfeeding if that's what they choose to do. We promote confidence for the parent and the infant to bond. We do non-judgmental support. There's lots of different ways that families look, and we support what the family wants and what their goal is, and whether it's a religious goal or just a personal goal, we support that patient. A postpartum doula can help tidy up the house. They can help prepare meals. They can, help run errands, or anything that the clients would want. The main goal for a postpartum doula is to facilitate the transition to parenthood. We do that by supplying reliable and factual information, reassurance, and hands-on support with children and household organization. Postpartum doulas offer evidence-based information on infant feeding, emotional and physical recovery from birth, infant soothing, and coping skills for new parents, and make appropriate referrals when needed for breastfeeding consultants, postpartum depression referrals. If the baby has a cleft lip or some other surgical thing, we can offer resources where they can have that taken care of. So I already talked about when I meet. So when I meet with the client, I just do an intake, and I ask the client what they want. And then that intake is given to the hospital if they're delivering in a hospital, or to the provider, whether it be a midwife or a physician. And then we do everything that we can to support that patient and what that patient needs. And there's times that, a doula will get set to the side, like if it's an emergency situation. And we explain that to the patient ahead of time, that, you know, there's times where this may be what you want, and we're going to do everything that we possibly can to do this. But there's times when, you know, that physician or that midwife's going to step in and say, no, we can't do this because of the safety of you and your child. So and then we have to know how to support that patient if she knows that she's not getting her dream birth. So when you're in labor, you have all of these crazy hormones. You have oxytocin, which it's called the love hormone, and you know it continues when your uterus is contracting and you feel the urge to push and you can't push. It also helps with the letdown of your milk, and then we have like endorphins that increase with pain and stress that the patient goes through. They have like there's hormones that they call them fight or flight hormones, which, you know, if you're ever in a situation where you're scared, you know, you fight or fight, you know, fight or flight, you defend yourself, you know, and do everything you can to protect yourself. Well, that's the same thing in labor. You know, some women, when they're in labor, they are in, you know, so much pain, or they have flashbacks to maybe like an abusive relationship or a sexual assault that can trigger and make these hormones come to surface, and that's when we step in and help calm the patient and relax the patient so that patient can have a positive experience and change whatever happened in the past that was negative, try to make it a positive experience in the moment. We are trained in all stages of labor, from the very beginning when the cervix opens to delivery. And with each stage, the patient is going through so many different emotions. You know, you're calm and excited and scared in the beginning, and then towards the middle, you're like, oh my God, this is happening. I want to have a baby, but I don't, you know, your body's just going through all this stuff. And then at the end, you have your baby, and all of those fears and all of those emotions are replaced with seeing your baby and going through that. So, during this time, we are still supporting the partners, the birth patient's partner, answering questions, you know, having them step out of the room and go get something to eat, you know, just so that they can take care of their needs as well, because everybody's focused on the patient, but no one really focuses on the partners. So we help with that. I had mentioned the trauma targeted patient. If a patient has been in a situation where they were sexually assaulted or traumatized in any way, sometimes having, you know, getting undressed to have a baby in front of, you know, a stranger with, you know, their provider or whoever is really uncomfortable. So we are trained to help support that patient. That's something that when I meet with a client, that if they tell me that they've had that trauma, I ask them what they want and what they don't want. A lot of times when you're having a baby in a hospital, you know, they come in and they check your cervix to see if your cervix is ripened. For someone who's been traumatized, they don't want that. They don't want you touching, you know, so we help advocate for that patient to say, hey, can we push this off a little, you know, and try something else. They don't need to come in every, you know, half hour, every hour to check that patient. We need to give that patient their space and support them. And, you know, and if it's necessary, it's necessary. But just as a routine check, just because, you know, that paper out there that they have to complete says, you know, you have to do the vitals and you have to do this at this time. that's that's not always necessary. We help patients with pain, whether they want medications, if they want breathing, if they want massage techniques. We help them with everything. Statistics have shown that 39% of women who have a doula present in the birthing room are less likely to have a C-section. 31% of women are less likely to use drugs like Pitocin to help speed up your labor and to help dilate your cervix. 9% are less likely to use any pain medications at all. 35% are less likely to rate their childbirth in a negative way. And 15% are more likely to have a vaginal birth versus a C-section. So that's what a doula does, and that's what we're here for. There's not a whole lot of doulas in West Virginia. I know of one in Charleston besides myself and my associate. So there's like 3 or 4 in Charleston that are actually practicing doula services. There's some in different areas of the state. So I can give my information to Sarah. If you're looking for a doula for your next childbirthing experience, I'd be happy to take you on. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Vania. Are you sure that's all you do?
Well, and the thing is I have my history. I've been in the medical field for a long time, for 30 years, and I've worked everywhere from pediatric intensive care to pediatric oncology and mother baby, labor hall, OBGYN. So I have it all. I'm an ultrasound tech, so I know what to look for and stuff. So I have the experience to help people, but every patient is like having your first patient all over again because everyone's needs are different. So you have to assess everyone individually to make them have the best experience they can.
Well, thank you so much. You did a wonderful job sharing about what a doula does, and we're just so thankful that you were able to join us today.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move Danielle over here. All right, so our final guest today is the one and only Danielle Walker. She is a civil rights leader, a mother advocate, and most recently was just named earlier this year the executive director of the ACLU of West Virginia. Everyone, please welcome her, and the show is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate having this uncomfortable conversation. So I also want to leave room for people to inhale and exhale together. This is a heavy conversation, but a much overdue one. This is a conversation that needs some action because words without works is a waste, and we see the numbers increasing every day. So my take on this is to go through my personal journey of becoming a mother with one step in the grave and one out. So I'm going to start with a poem called Unexpected. Unexpected, your body shifts under the control of something forming. Unexpected, your body is under the control of white coats. Unexpected, you have 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot out. Unexpected, you become a statistic beyond teen pregnancy, but a number in America's ignored population in an unmarked grave. Unexpected, your positive pregnancy test is a plea from family and friends to really think, research, and survive. Unexpected, you are surviving the encounter of a quest of finding a doctor's office that is comfortable, culturally informed, and specializing in difficult births. Unexpected, you become a medical assistant with no voice, no advocate, no care, no way out. Unexpected, you find yourself celebrating blood pressures, glucose tests, yet your blood pressure is spiking and your weight is the issue. Stress is a factor without any referrals to service. Unexpected, your pleas become your fault. Unexpected, the medical professionals become saints and saviors as you may transition to the unknown. Unexpected, in the midst of cold blues, an emergency C-section is a solution to the madness of continued ignores. Unexpected, you finally have a voice with no damn choice. Unexpected, the avenues transform into authorizations for your next breath to be of value or survive the encounter per insurance if you even have. Unexpected, my body, mind, and soul could be the weapon to end the life of my unborn. Unexpected, the fight of survival is beyond me, the birth and hours to come. Unexpected, now I need a pediatrician with a specialty in what? Unexpected, a list isn't given, just a list of names rattled off. Unexpected, after labor, after being in labor for a week, seizures at sundown for 5 days, no food and just ice chips for 3, water bag not bursting, contractions beyond the Richter scale, and being no ways tired. Unexpected, another 12 hours awaiting a surgery room, another ultrasound, another blood panel, another second of waiting if this is the end of me and the beginning of he. Unexpected, a preemie, unexpected jaundice, unexpected NICU, unexpected fighter, unexpected cold blue during and after the C-section, unexpected of the unknown, unexpected awakening in a room with a rocking chair and no family, unexpected of a tragedy, unexpected of a casualty, unexpected of years of postpartum specialist medications, PTSD, experimental meds and procedures. Unexpected. Thanks for my children. Thanks for my miscarriages. Thanks for the continued systemic racism in healthcare. Thanks for ignoring the patients. Thanks for the data that goes unnoticed. Thanks for lifting the hard truths. Thanks for it all. Thanks to the doulas and the midwives that will diversify surviving the encounter. Thank you for allowing me to share with you. I am a woman. I am a woman of color. I am Black. I am a patient. I am a mother. I am an advocate. I am tired. I am strong. I am sick and tired of being described as strength of Black women. It is by a generational trauma and or a generational curse. If you have never walked in my shoes, how could you ever sing my blues? Individual healthcare plans is non-existent, but IEPs are even hard to fight to come by in the public school system. So who do I have this praise and this thanks and this pain and this joy and this sadness and this fear and this anxiety of all? To one I give it all to, the father of gynecology in the 1800s, J. Marion Sims. Even had a statue up in New York until it was finally tumbled down. It took the 20th century to understand that the things that he did to enslaved persons, all enslaved persons who were able to get pregnant, no matter what their race was or their ethnicity. doing these experiments without anesthesia, meaning that property could not feel pain. Property could not give consent. Property had no say-so. Even in his experimentations, telling the slave owners that you must pay the tax for this person. You must feed and clothe them. But I shall take my scalpel and use them as I please, because after all, they're property that does not need consent. It did not matter the yells. It did not matter the blood loss. It was a game of how this system around gynecology was brought up. See, 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot out. It was a proverb from my great-great-great-grandmother. See, I thought I had survived teen pregnancy, and coming into the room and going to a Planned Parenthood clinic where I had my pregnancy test, and the nurse coming in and telling me, congratulations. I did not know she was being ironic or being a hypocrite. Because what are you congratulating me for? You can't even give me a list of OBGYNs. Where's the list of midwives? And is it still true today? What consent do you give to these Black mothers, to these Black patients who can carry a child? Because we must be inclusive to all sexual orientations. What consent do you give to this person when their blood pressure is steadily going up and they're spilling protein in their urine? What consent do you give to diversity of bringing in another life into this world? Midwifery was given since slavery, since before slavery. But it's somehow a system that we have conformed to, of having hospitals and having physicians who went through years of schooling, that midwives should be left behind. And it became part of the have and the have-nots. You don't need a midwife. Go to the hospital. And now we're bringing it back. It's part of the history. Sicken, holding back the tears. Black babies are dying. Black persons who are pregnant are dying at 2 and 3 times more the rate than anyone else. And so I ask you, when will it be enough? West Virginia, what are you doing? Why do we not have a breakdown of race? Are these lives not worth taking a look at so we can have legislation? When we hear the tragedies of an infant dying or a mother dying, but where does your heart go when it's both? Double funeral, double pain, double hurt. You must survive the encounter of the statistics, and some are even unknown. It has been a journey. It has been a battle. Who do you call to advocate for you? When do you start the process? These are the ongoing conversations that we must have. 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot out. A dark conversation wears a positive light. An uncomfortable conversation for a moment to be part of a movement. Survival in healthcare. Survival in childcare. I never had white coat syndrome before, but I still have it today. ignoring my blood pressure. I've been on blood pressure pills since 1997. Insurance, the cost. If someone would have just listened, but who was going to listen to a 19-year-old who knew her body better than most? And what book do you read where there's a piece of advocacy? Not one. When you get information about your doctor, you have the 24-hour call line. But what happens if you feel that a nurse doesn't want to touch your body? Because that's real. If you are overweight, that is the key issue of all of your ailments. Where you have a system based on racism in America around healthcare, around Black folks, the numbers don't lie. So am I truly a survivor? My infant didn't die within the first year, but he did die 2 years ago. Due to complications of leukemia, because the system still needs fixed. Was it the ignores because he was a preemie? Was it because even at every ACLU, my children were in the doctor? But what happens when we have transportation issues? We have so many deficits within the state of West Virginia where we don't even have OBGYNs in every city, in every county. What are we to do? And how are we to assess the issues? This is where we come together and you listen to hear and become active listeners, and we bring it to the legislation. This is where we're asking for your pleas of joining on October 15th and 16th. We need allies and we need advocates to stand with those who we have lost along the way, are those who will continue to have those injuries until they take the last breath of their body. Join us and learn from the dark past so another family does not have to go through this. Join us on October 15 and 16 as we walk the halls in the People's House under the Golden Dome. Research and diversify other ways of giving childbirth. I'm heavy. I'm emotional. Three births, 3 traumas, preeclampsia for all 3, C-sections, the scarring, congestive heart failure. But I'm here to share my truth. I'm here to speak truth to power. I am here to advocate and be an activist. I am here to collaborate collectively on solutions. I am here because I have no privilege to be no ways tired. I am here and I am ready to answer any questions. And please share your concerns in the chat. Thank you. I am Danielle Walker, Executive Director of ACLU, West Virginia.
Thank you, Danielle. I have gone ahead and dropped down here in the scroll ticker here the information for registering for this event right here, Empowering Black Infant and Maternal Health Progress in West Virginia. This is an initiative that Danielle, Rhonda, and lots of other advocates and leaders from across the state have been organizing. So if you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to ask. We would love to have you there with us in coalition and in community. I don't see any questions in the chat at this time, just lots of thank yous. Danielle, that was really beautiful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. So as we conclude, Sarah, will you finish?
I guess before we end this presentation, I would like one more time just to thank our panelists because we're going to be finishing. And all week we've been bringing like self-care techniques to you at the end of our conversations because the space is heavy. In this conversation today, every panelist is holding back tears. I'm sure many of you in the audience are too. So we have a really special conclusion for you today that Danielle will intro. I'd like to welcome you tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be another conversation with partners in the space on LGBTQIA health. We'll meet right here at the same time on the same platforms.
So let's speak about self-care. Self-care is self-love. Self-care is self-preservation. I would like for you to stay with us and watch a video, a TED Talk from Dr. Bryant, who allows you to be easy with yourself, but also allows you to speak truth to power of the years of the unknown and being forced to survive the encounter. Sarah, could you please play the video?
Come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. This is a call, an invitation, a manifesto, a recipe for those of us who are struggling, juggling, carrying the heavy weight of collective trauma. Those whose nervous systems are screaming or whispering under the weight of traumatic stress. The kind of traumatic stress that causes you to fight, flee, freeze, or try to appease others in order to survive yourself. The kind of traumatic stress that can cause migraines and insomnia, backache and stomach ache, the collective wound that gives birth to depression and despair, panic attacks, and the cold grip of numbness. I am here for those who can't stop crying and those who are all cried out. Let us take collective breath, inhaling in through the nose, exhaling out through the mouth. I am here for survivors of collective trauma, what some call intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, the traumatic wounds of oppression. Many of our indigenous siblings call it ancestral wounds and collective grief. I am here for descendants of enslavement. I am here for survivors and descendants of Trail of Tears and internment camps and Holocaust and genocide and colonization and decolonization and neo-colonialism. Many of us are bleeding, but we're still here. As a psychologist, I recognize from our research that we desire to do more than survive. We want to thrive. Psychologists and indigenous healers have found multiple medicines to address collective trauma. I am here to transcribe the prescription for our collective liberation. The first medicine is truth. We must face and speak the truth of our collective wounds if we are to heal. Denial will not save us. There are those who do not want us to speak truth, but they are the ones that don't want us to survive. They call truth-telling divisive, but truth is the only path to healing and liberation. And so we resist the silences. We recognize that critical consciousness is key. Train your eyes to see the way truth brings a tide into your noonday reality. Train your eyes and your ears, your heart and your mind to recognize socio-political landmines that have created explosions in your life and the lives of those you love. Do not run from truth. Lean into it. Speak it boldly, tenderly, holistically. If it aligns with you, one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, and take a breath at your own pace.
Cole, he's my miracle child. So how does your miracle?
The second medicine is to free your heart. Your heart is an orchestra, so let it sing. We must resist the messaging, the socialization, the programming that tells us our communities are not deserving of our mourning. We are not justified in our outrage, that we cannot afford the luxury of depression, even as we carry the weight of despair. But the reality is that we are worthy of the full range of human emotions. I am here for those who learned early to fix your face. I am here for those whose ancestors taught them how to hide pain in laughter, how to tuck it in freshly baked bread, how to braid it in your hair, how to plant it in your prayers that rise above muffled screams. I am here for those who are exhausted from stereotype and stigma and surveillance and racial battle fatigue. I am here to say this sacred space is sanctuary. So in this collective sigh, we can feel our feelings. Colonization and oppression tried to choke your ancestors' heart. To honor them and to heal your family line. Heal, feel all of your feelings boldly and unapologetically. You are not a machine. You are a human being. You are not a machine. You are a human being. You are worthy of your feelings. There is freedom and liberation in your feelings. And so if it aligns with you, embrace yourself and take breath at your own pace. The third medicine is community care. Colonization teaches competition, individualism, and the ultimate goal of gaining power over other people's bodies and resources. Resist that script. Recite the love language of your ancestors. Allow people to show up for you. Allow yourself to be yourself in the presence of another. African-centered psychology teaches us that we are all interrelated, interconnected, interwoven from the same river, dancing the same sacred dance, a homecoming. This is the truth of who we are. An African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so in the language of my ancestors, walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary. We thrive and get liberated together. So let us take breath together at our own pace. The fourth medicine is self-care. Oppression and trauma teach us to disconnect from ourselves, to erase ourselves, to silence ourselves, to martyr ourselves, to overlook ourselves in service of corporations and institutions and plantations. But the reality is that we are human beings, and Tricia Hersey, the Nat Bishop, teaches us we have the right to our rest. For collective liberation, go take a nap. Drink water with cucumber and lemon. Go sit under a tree. Eat fresh fruits and vegetables. In order to be healed, set boundaries and protect your peace. In order to break the intergenerational chain, Go lie down somewhere. Laugh loudly. Run you a bubble bath. Get free. Perhaps you never saw a model or an example of what it looked like to be a marginalized person at rest. It's important for you to become the model, for you to let your children catch you relaxing, playing, having a good time, laughing instead of always hustling, always stressed out, always zapping out. If you never saw the model before, you can become the model. This is what it looks like for a Black woman to be at rest. I know you've seen us laboring. I know you've seen us leading. But honestly, is there anything more delicious or sacred than a Black woman at rest? Fill in your own marginalized identity. Let your children see that this is what it looks like for a blank person to be at rest. So from this revolutionary, radical act, let's take breath at our own pace. The fifth medicine is creativity. We get liberated through our expression. Oppression and trauma teach you to hide your voice. And so get liberated in the expressive arts. Access the mental health benefits of your creativity. Reclaim your soul and your voice. So breathe and paint and breathe and sing and breathe and dance and breathe and beadwork and breathe and pottery and breathe and quilt making and breathe in culinary arts and breathe in cosmetology and breathe and live and breathe and be made whole and be made whole and be made whole and breathe and breathe and breathe and breathe. The sixth medicine is resistance. Unlike most forms of psychology, liberation psychology teaches more than coping, it teaches resistance. We must actively resist oppression. We must actively resist insecurity, intimidation, and internalized racism, sexism, and every form of oppression that tries to teach you that you are unworthy. We have to shift the tide. How do we shift the tide? By advocating, by voting, by running for office, by boycotting, by protesting, by dismantling, by rebuilding, by loving, by laughing, by purposeful parenting, by allyship and being a co-conspirator. This is how we resist. And I know many of you get weary because you're one of a few on your job or in your neighborhood. But I want you to know every major movement started with a few. So in the words of Tracy Chapman, don't you know we're talking about a revolution? Sounds like a whisper. The seventh and final medicine is culture and spirituality. The trauma of oppression tries to convince you that you come from nothing, while they look to you to take everything. That is appropriation. And so reclaim your wealth. Your culture is your wealth. Turn and tell the person next to you, I'm rich. I'm rich. I'm rich. Reclaim your art, your language, the indigenous sciences, your wisdom. Reclaim your foreparents' prayers. Reclaim your foreparents' prophecies. Reclaim their wisdom and lean into the truth of your own beauty and genius. When you get clear about who in the world you are, you know you never show up anywhere by yourself. I come with backup. And so as we reclaim our culture and our spirituality, we get free. And so from that liberated space, let's take breath together at our own pace. The reality is that despite the wounds of collective trauma, we can grab hold of collective liberation. We are still here. We are a radiant masterpiece, frayed edges, some stains and some sticky spots, but still here. In order for us to get liberated, we have to be very clear that our liberation is tied to each other. And so as we look around this room, let us commit ourselves to break every chain, break every chain, break every chain, psychologically, politically, economically, socially, financially, theologically. Let's break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. It is so, and so it is.
Thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists, to Danielle Walker, to Rhonda Rogombe, to Vania Riddle, and thanks to all of you in the audience for your awesome questions and participation. We'll see you tomorrow.